South Carolina over under win total of 6 wins, minus 140 to the over, plus 110 to the under at Caesars Sportsbook. The non-conference slate, we go Georgia State, Charlotte, South Carolina State, and then the finale at Clemson. The draw from the West, the Texas A&M game will be in Columbia. You also have at Arkansas on there. Get into division play, and Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Florida is going to be your road slate. Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee, all at home. This is an offense that had negligible quarterback play at the Power 5 level throughout the season last year and found a way to make it to a bowl game. Now they have Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler, who played some of his best football at Oklahoma at a time when Shane Beamer, now South Carolina coach, was on the staff. Some of the reports from the way that things have been going so far indicate that Rattler's looking very good and getting closer to showing on the field on Saturdays some of that potential that led to his very, very high projection coming out of high school. The South Carolina hype train is rolling. What are we doing with 6 wins? Again, minus 140 to the over, plus 110 to the under.
Over. Now, Coca may have this graphic. I already hit this back in May. I actually grabbed 5.5 to the over at minus 140, which I thought was just flat stealing. I have these guys at 6.6, so that's a solid over for me. It's almost 6.7, so if we're really interested in decimals. Look, this was not a good football team last year, okay? They were probably like 2 net wins lucky. And I'm talking about not like, hey, they were unlucky, of course, to have their quarterbacks go down. But as far as the quality of play on the field versus their actual record, this was not a good team. It was kind of a bad team that was very lucky that they had the record they had. And I bet them over last year, 3.5 and 4.5, because I got it early again and also bet it on the show. And I'm a believer in this team. They didn't have any quarterback play last year at all. I mean, it was terrible. Like Luke Doty, hot garbage. Jason Brown, 8-6 touchdown interception ratio. Yeah, like it was bad. I think that they can go from a team that I had rated in the 80s, right? Because I don't use bowl games. I think North Carolina didn't care to be there that day, and I think that messes up my power ratings if I include some of these non-playoff bowl games, to a team that can be like a top 40 type team. And a top 40 type team has a pretty good chance of making a bowl and a decent chance of winning 7 games against this schedule. So I'm on the over. I think Spencer Rattler will help quite a bit. I like the offensive line experience, even though it was bad last year. Like they're at least not young and bad. They could, in theory, be better. Defensive line should be one of the better ones in the division. Give me the over.
Push. With a slight lean to the under. I do agree with you, though, on a lot of what you're saying, because this South Carolina's offense, you said, it was really bad last year. Like, just like success rate, they were at, I think, 101st. EPA on offense, they were, I think, about 99th. And then I talked earlier, like Georgia struggles in the red zone as far as finishing and scoring touchdowns. South Carolina scored touchdowns on 48.8% of its red zone possessions last year, which was 118th. And we have spent a lot of time on this show debating how good Spencer Rattler truly is compared to where he was rated as a recruit. But regardless of if he ever lives up to being the number 1 QB in his class and like the Heisman favorite going into last season and all that stuff, he's a definitive upgrade on what South Carolina had at quarterback. So this offense is going to improve. But where the problems start is the schedule's still the schedule. They've got to go to Arkansas. They've got Georgia. They have to go to Kentucky. They get A&M. So it's like that draw from the West at Arkansas, A&M, not fun. You got Florida on the road, and then you finish with Clemson on the road. Odds are they're going to be losing at least, 67, 2/3 of those games. So it's going to come down to how perfect can you be at home in the other games that are, gimmies or the coin flips. And I just don't think that I think this team's going to be better, but I still think they're going to be 6-6 most likely, and my number has them at 5.8. So it's not a play for me as far as the under, but just for the purpose of the show, under. But it's a push.
Over. And I'm doing this honestly. I'm like, I will circle back on this, and I will make sure that I hold myself accountable when we do the West on Wednesday. But as I was lining up, all of the games here that we had to break down, I think that Texas A&M is going to lose at South Carolina. I think it would be hilarious game of the SEC so far, because Texas A&M is at Alabama on October 8th in the game of the year. Like, all things considered, everything that's around Texas A&M, everything around Alabama, the Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban spat, that game is going to be absolutely massive. CBS has an SEC on CBS doubleheader with one game at 3:30, one game at 8 p.m. on October 8th. I don't have any inside information. I would place a show bet that one of those two games on that massive Saturday is going to be Texas A&M and Alabama. So you're going to get so high for that game. Bye week right on the other side of that for the October 15th. And when does Texas A&M return to action? October 22nd at South Carolina. Trappy spot. South Carolina is going to be hyped with the Aggies in town. The Aggies will probably be nationally ranked, because when you lose to Alabama, you don't ever fall in the rankings. Heck, you might move up in the rankings if you play them close enough. And so I will circle back on this, but I've got South Carolina knocking off Texas A&M. And that's kind of what gives me the comfort and the flexibility to be able to say over here, because clearly that's going to mess with the numbers in a way that projections don't, because projections are going to favor the Aggies. I think that Spencer Rattler is at least one win on your final win total. They went 6-6 last year. Spencer Rattler can take me over to the top. They've got, similar to what I said with Florida, where you go up and down the depth chart and you can single out players that you like a lot that would start at a lot of other SEC teams. The whole depth chart isn't filled with them, but at least there is enough of that high-end potential where I think that this is going to be a Gamecocks team that's going to be able to build on the success of last season. I think South Carolina goes 7-5. Missouri and Tennessee, key games that you're going to need to get to this win total. Those games are at home. It's going to be a fun season to see if Shane Beamer can build on it. I think they do. I go over.
All right. So I feel like there were two teams coming in with a lot of hype: Tennessee and South Carolina, and Kentucky. But I think Kentucky's had more success than those other two as of late. I feel like I couldn't be bullish on both. I think 6-6 is probably the outcome for South Carolina. I'll go under again just to play the contrarian. I love Shane Beamer. I love the culture that he has built. He has players buying in. They're passionate. They buy his message. I know there is a talent upgrade at quarterback. I still have massive concerns about Spencer Rattler. Like, what happens if things go bad? What happens? I mean, and they're not going to be undefeated, but when they lose multiple games, is he going to start blaming his guys, blaming his offensive linemen? I just need to see him grow up. And I've heard he's grown up, and I've heard he's done, the things that he needs to do to be a leader in that locker room. But it's easy to lead when you haven't lost anything yet, and you haven't had a bad game, and your receivers haven't dropped the ball, and you haven't been blown out, or lose on the road against Arkansas, which I don't know. I think they lose that game early. I'm not sold on Rattler. So I'm going to go with the under, but I think 6-6 is probably the right number.
Bud?
Muted, Bud.
Bud, we can't hear you.
Apologies. My ceiling fan was making a bunch of noise, so I got up to try to just kill this thing for the second time in the show. Quick injury/betting update. If I'm watching my screen here, Antoine Green is announced out 6 to 10 weeks with a collarbone injury. That's a fairly significant loss for North Carolina, as Chip can tell you. That number is sitting 3, going to 2.5 in a couple spots. So if you like Appalachian State and you want to get to 3 at home, you probably need to do that before we get off this show, because it's going to go to 2.5, I think.
To your point, Danny, 3-3 to start the year. How do they handle adversity? At Arkansas, Georgia, and then at Kentucky. All that before hitting their bye, which leads into Texas A&M. So that would need to be something where the culture, what the big C word, that whatever has been built there, that with Shane Beamer, they're going to need to lean on it, because they're going to take their lumps early. Can they rally and be able to finish strong? That'll be definitely something to watch.